I have a hardwood safe filled with cursed VHS tapes that are never to be watched by anyone, ever. Only because I have watched them and have faced and or witnessed the consequences. This post is a warning for the following VHS tape known as Tubes Demonstration 1. I only have one tape of this, but judging by the title and where I found it, I can assume that there are at least 2 more. If you find either a copy or a sequel to this, read this first and do not watch this tape. It has a danger level of 4. The name of the tape is Tubes Demonstration 1. It is a blank Sony tape in a black plastic case with a note card fastened to it with the title written on it. The runtime is unknown for reasons I'll get into later. Keep this tape in a secure wooden box with no metal hinges. Metal only amplifies the energy of the tape. Finally, and I cannot stress this enough, it has a danger level of 4. See Part 1 for the danger guide on cursed VHS tapes. I acquired this tape by exploring an abandoned mental hospital with some friends in my state. We found a locked filing cabinet in the storage room of one of the main buildings, and since it was in a metal box, I could feel the energy coming off of the tape. When I opened it, there were 2 empty slots and 1 tape in a black case. My friends didn't really care about it, so they walked off while I put the tape in my bag. About a week later, I got my friend and watch partner together and set up in our new configuration with the couch pushed back and the door open. The video started with a title card saying it belonged to the mental hospital I took it from and that taking it from the premises was unlawful and punishable with a large fine and jail time. It then cuts to a woman sitting on a bed in a hospital nightgown in a white room. She had short black hair and stared at the ground with clear white eyes. In the bottom corner there was a timestamp of July 24th, 1986, and a name, Ashlyn. It was silent for the first couple minutes, just her staring at the floor until a door could be heard opening. Footsteps came in, stopping behind the camera. Ashlyn looked at the person, then looked back down and to the right, then reached over and held onto her left arm. The person began talking. It was a man. He sounded old and probably was a doctor there. "Please demonstrate to the camera what you can do," he asked. "Why? So you can tell me I'm making it up? So you can tell me it's all in my head?" she said. She turned her attention to the man. "This entire time you've told me it's fake. You've told me there's no physical way for my body to change like it does," she yelled. She stood up from the bed. She was much taller than my watch partner and I expected. "I realize that, Miss Ashlyn, but now that you have demonstrated that your body can in fact change, we would like to record and study the transformation in your other form," the man said. She stood there for a second, looking surprised, then aggravated. As she blinked, her eyes changed color. From the best I could see of the video quality, the right side of her right eye and the left side of her left eye had turned black, as her iris became a spiral of colors. "I knew this was a mistake. I should have left when I had the chance," she said. "I'm sorry, Miss Ashlyn, but we can't let you leave until we have documentation at the very least," the man said. She stood there for a second before looking down and closing her eyes, then opening them, looking at the man's location, her pupils now dilated at sporadic angles. "Fine," she said as rocky protrusions bulged out of the side of her arms. Her skin began changing colors. Rings of red, blues, yellows, and whites began to move down her body as her nightgown was being ripped off by the growths. Her hair began growing purple, and coral-like tubes grew out of her back like exhaust pipes. Symmetrical holes began forming on her torso and legs as the nightgown finally came off. The rocky protrusions opened up as black and white tubes slid out from them, 10 or so on each arm. Her cheeks became raw and cut up. It reminded me of Battle Angel Alita. She suddenly fell to her knees, clutching her stomach as a red liquid spewed from the exhaust pipes on her back and onto the walls. She grew bigger, veins pulsing all over her body until sharp red and black spikes sprang from the sides of her legs, and her shoulder blades shot out and wrapped over her shoulders before fusing together above her chest. She stopped growing when her head nearly touched the ceiling, still on her knees. There was a long period of silence as Ashlyn had her eyes closed and her head down. Miss Ashlyn?" the man asked, his voice quivering. "Are you—" The tubes on Ashlyn's right arm suddenly jutted toward where the man was off screen. Then there was a squishy splat sound, followed by coughing and a muffled cry for help. Several red tubes came out of the holes in her torso and slithered their way toward the off-screen body of the man. The sound of clothing tearing and flesh being ripped apart could be heard as something began moving through the red tubes and into her body. After about a minute, the red tubes detached and slithered back into Ashlyn's body. The black and white tubes went limp and moved back toward Ashlyn's arm. However, there was no sound of the man's body hitting the floor. Ashlyn's upper body began to shake violently as she gritted her still white teeth. Then gallons of black liquid burst from the exhaust pipes on her back, covering the whole room in an oily black sheen. My watch partner mentioned that what she just saw was going to give her nightmares, and that must have triggered what happened next. Ashlyn opened her eyes, and they were staring at me. The black and white tubes from her arms shot out toward the camera and through the screen, embedding themselves in the walls of my watch room. My friend outside the door saw this and ran to turn the power off. Ashlyn, on the other hand, was already crawling out of the TV. She could just barely fit through the large flat screen. My watch partner had the right idea and managed to jump in between two tubes and out of the door, but when I tried to do the same, the tubes bloated up, making it impossible to get through. By the time I turned around, Ashlyn was already in the room and took up more than half the space. She reached for me with both hands and grabbed me by the torso, then brought me up to her face. I struggled to get free, but she shushed me and told me to look into her eyes. Her voice sounded like 10 homogeneous, pixelated voices in one. Her pupils suddenly moved out of her eyes, then fell back in like a water droplet into a pond. I felt like I fell into them too. Then it went all dark. I came to consciousness in some sort of a hospital lobby. I wasn't really sure what was going on until I saw Ashlyn in her human form walk into the lobby with a man. The man led the way to the front desk where a woman sat, and he checked Ashlyn into the hospital. She looked guilty of something, but I wasn't quite sure what. The world faded to black again, then back to a large room filled with patients. Ashlyn is there, sitting in the corner of the room by herself. The room begins to change around her. Patients come and go, and a season or two changes when suddenly another woman shows up at her table, a patient as well. A couple days go by as they talk. Then Ashlyn decides to show this person her hand as it begins to change colors and grow holes. The woman recoils in horror and runs away from the table. Everything fades away again as it becomes a solitary confinement room. And, again, days go by with every now and then a man coming in and injecting a needle into her arm. Time goes back to normal as the man comes in again, but Ashlyn refuses the needle and tries to push the man away. Then, 2 men in white clothes come in and restrain her. She tries to shake them off, and eventually the black and white tubes come out of her arms and pin them into the walls. The exhaust pipes pop up out of her back as her body only partially changes. She grabs the man with the needle with one of the tubes and throws him against the metal door to her room, hard enough to dent it. Her eyes spiral with different reds until she realizes what she had just done and reverts back to her normal form. The room then fades to black, and I pop up in the hospital room coated in an oily black substance, with Ashlyn in her human form, sitting on the bed looking at her nails. "I've been waiting in this room for a long time," she said, before looking up at me. I took a step backwards, but I slipped in the liquid and fell on my back. "Sorry about that." He didn't agree with me, she said as she stood up from the bed. "What are you?" I asked, not sure what else to do. Why is it that everyone asks, "What are you?" Huh? It's never a "Hi, how are you doing?" or "I love your nails, did you just get them done?" No, it's always, "What are you?" she said as she walked over to me. I felt a cold rush of adrenaline enter my body as I backed away from her, until I hit a wall. Suddenly, I felt something rubbery under my hand and looked down to see a large scrap of warped skin. I realized I was in a pile of it and shredded clothes. I wasn't sure what else to do, so I let out a scream. I was so focused on my fear in that moment that I didn't notice that Ashlyn had crouched down in front of me and placed her hand over my mouth. She put her finger up to her lips, telling me to be quiet. Her nails were painted black, the same color and sheen of the walls. "I'm going to take my hand off of your mouth, and when I do, you're going to stop screaming, or I'll do the same to you what I did to the doctor. 'Kay?" Her white eyes felt like they were staring into my soul. I nodded and she removed her hand, then stood up and offered to help me up. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand. She pulled me up on her own, with no effort at all, then pointed me to the door. "Now, I need you to leave," she said. I looked to the door as it had opened into a black void. "Where does that go?" I asked. "Out," she said. Out? Meaning I can just leave? I said. I thought there had to be some sort of trick to this. You saw some of my life, and I saw some of yours. You have shit to do, and so do I. So, leave, before I change my mind, she said, motioning to the door. I looked at her for a minute before looking at the door and leaving. Next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital. When my friend turned off the power, both my watch partner and friend came back to see me floating in midair where Ashlyn had been holding me. They tried to get me down, but I wouldn't budge until about 30 minutes later when I fell to the floor. After that, I was in a coma for 2 weeks. At least, that's what my watch partner told me. I'm still not sure where I went or what exactly happened, but I feel like I could have easily died, so why didn't I? Either way, 2 other possible tapes are missing, and I don't know where they could have gone. So, if you find one, do not watch it.